Welcome to the Three Old Goalies podcast, a Delusion Group podcast.
The Three Old Goalies are brought to you by thesquad.com because everybody loves a W. Check out the squad for all your recruiting needs. Music for the show is provided by the Floodgate Operators. Be sure to check them out on Apple Music or Spotify.
The Three Old Goalies podcast is not for goalkeepers under the age of 17. And now we send you over to Boa, Evie, and Bone, the Three Old Goalies.
For tuning into the Three Old Goalies podcast. I am EV along with the Three Old Goalies, John Boa and Greg Deutsch. Tonight's guest is Dave Rubinson, a friend of ours who we've known for decades. And he will hopefully be sharing with us some insight into US soccer and where everything seems to be headed. Dave coached for years at Texas Christian University and has been, I was thinking this afternoon, Bone, that we have we have a lot of guys on the podcast who truly helped build the sport at various levels in the United States. And Dave is a guy who truly helped build the sport collegiately and particularly in a lot of the ODP and regional programs throughout the United States, obviously through US soccer. So we're happy to have him, and welcome to the show, Coach. I hope it doesn't rub off on you and people are like, what the hell are you doing on that show? But we are glad you are here. And we look forward to it. As again, let me just reiterate that the Three Old Goalies sometimes, because we're old and because we're sort of the get off our lawn guys, it can get salty, and we encourage people to listener discretion is advised. So, without further ado, Greg, I will turn it over to you to introduce our special guest tonight.
All right. Well, we have first John Boa. I want to make sure, did you have a beer with David, 20 years ago or anything like that before I get started?
I don't think I've ever met Coach Rubinson.
Okay. All right.
My coach.
However, I believe that the regional camp where you and I met was at TCU, and I'm sure Coach was involved with that either as the host or as a coach or both, most likely both. Yeah.
1985.
Oh, were you working with Joe?
1985, I was 16.
Eric, were you working with Joe? Yep.
No, it was we had the regional camp. John Rennie was the regional coach. Oh, okay. We good? We good? Can you hear me?
He's frozen.
Okay. All right.
Yep. I think Bone's frozen too. Oh, Greg is fine.
No, he was just
that was when Joe Macknick but Joe had his first. That was the first year they did their goalkeeper camp and they came to TCU, and it was the same time that the regional camp was going on.
Right. And I was there for the regional camp because John Rennie was the regional coach, and I was working at Duke. So he said, "Come down to the goalkeepers." So that's right, and that's where I met young John Boa from Mississippi, who was getting shelled and on a regular basis, and so that's how that whole thing started. So
everything in the Three Old Goalies is related to.
I almost got fired that year.
Who did?
Yeah. I think I almost got fired that summer because the equipment manager told us we could use the practice football field when Pat Sullivan was a football coach. And I said, we can. I didn't even ask to use it. Anyway, he got back in town and saw people down on there. And I don't remember if it was my camp or number one camp or Joe's camp or regional camp, but I got called into the AD's office, and I almost got fired for that.
I survived different. Yeah. So, okay, Greg. Sorry, we've delayed you again.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. So, John Boa, you always like these numbers that you follow after me. So we're going to blow you away with this one. Coached 784 games.
It's a lot.
That's a lot of games.
That is a ton of games.
A Ton of games.
I did.
Oh, yeah. Unbelievable. David Rubinson.
Well-
I mean, all at TCU.
I tell you though. Well,
That is
I have to tell you, when we had a parting of the ways at TCU, when we had a parting of the ways at TCU, my wife and I added up all the number of games I'd coached, both men and women, and I thought it was 900 and so whatever the number was, and I said, "How many did we win?" And I think it was like 192 or something. I said, "We won that many?" So anyway, we didn't have a whole lot back then.
it was 292, Coach, that you won. How about that?
292.
292.
Ooh, almost won 300. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Dave, tell us.
Not sure where you
little
came
bit,
up with that, but anyway.
To share, you just mentioned that TCU honored you, and it was the Dave Rubinson Legacy Night last September, and
Yep.
you got the key to TCU. Now, I've heard of giving a key to the city, right? The mayor gives you the, walk us through how and what this is and what it means. I mean, I'm keeping this tradition, Ryan. I got the Texas, because he's from Texas, Ryan. Of course, I got the colors, Horned Frogs with purple. And
Yeah,
Ryan,
you did.
I
You
told
did better than I
I
did.
told you before I go on, Ryan. I told you I'd have something giant. How about that? Andre the Giant. And that's just because Ryan
That is true.
last week was at WrestleMania with his kid. He was watching it. He had a great time. So
Sweet.
I told you I'd present something giant. Anywho, Coach. So back to what is the key to TCU? I mean, that's a pretty outstanding night. It must have been.
Well, it truly was a special night. I didn't expect that. This was a long time, and the way we had the party, it was kind of fun after all that. New athletic director came in, and we were really close to he dropped the men's program after 2002, which I started in 81 with just the men part-time. And then we added the women, and I called Anson and said, what do you think? Cause he had offered me $22,000, the athletic director. It came time to sign. I don't even know if I signed the contract. It was $20,000. I called Anson. Yeah, it's okay. So I went ahead and did it. But I mean, it's the best decision I ever made. My kids got their education there. I love Fort Worth, love TCU. And anyway, when we had the parting of the ways with another athletic director, when he walked into our meeting, and we'd had lunch one day, and we were so close to getting it right on the women's side. We had 4 kids coming off Dallas Texans, who are one of the top teams in the country. Then we had a starting forward for the Icelandic full national team coming. Anyway, we knew if we could get to the corner, we'd be okay. Well, we didn't get to it. And he walks into the meeting, and he said, look, you're 24 years. You really have no consistent pattern of success, so we're going another direction. And I kind of started laughing because we had no scholarships for the men. No, we had 2.5 for 2 years. And then 10 years before we had any for the women, then we started doing it 3 at a time. So as you're going forward, you're still going backwards because you're upsetting a lot of kids as you're trying to program. So anyway, for them to do that was really, really special. Our kids all went to school there. Our oldest son was a 2-time All-American golfer, represented the United States twice through golf. And for them to do that for me, I had kids come back from Ohio, Washington State, and around here. So it was truly special. It really was. I don't know what the key to the university is, though, but it made me feel welcome at least.
Yeah. Now, obviously, you're from that area. You played at the Pasquala High School, and then you played at TCU, or you were a defender there. And then you got right into coaching. How did that transpire? What was the journey?
Well,
I mean, it was like you're done your senior year, and then you're taking over a program.
It didn't work exactly exactly like that. It's funny how our sport intertwines people, right? And I didn't start playing soccer till I was 14, but when I started, nobody played, and that was back in the mid 60s. We started showing the ASL on D. And what was it, guys? Danny Blandmeyer, I think, was one of the announcers. You're too young, Greg, I think. But anyway, and a mother went out and bought a ball. And we went down into this park and started playing soccer. There were a couple of soccer fields down there. We got an Austrian coach. We got a Hungarian coach. People drove by, obviously not knowing what we were doing. And then we got an Englishman that became our coach. He taught at a private school here in Fort Worth. And so he was our first real coach. And we had another gentleman, where was Mohammed? And Ben Barker was from Morocco. So we, people, they'd see us, and I had an Egyptian coach along the way. But I went back to TCU to play in 1973, fall 1973, because we had a Scottish coach guy named Pat Craig who was really, really good. And he asked me to come back. Well, it was a club team. I couldn't get into full-time school. I went a year and a half to the junior college, had no clue what I was doing there. And my first soccer coach had moved to California, the Englishman, and he was taking a trip around the world, teaching some classes in Australia and in England, and was on his way to India as well. So I took a trip around the world with him to help him with what he was doing. Then I came back home, and this was 1970. Bought a car, moved to California, and I was out there off and on for a couple of years, and then went to TCU. And then I went fall 73, spring 74. Then I laid out fall 74 and got my pilot's license. And then I went back to school and met my wife then. And then I was playing, we had a Hungarian coach. And so I finished in 77 and got married. That was when I went to the Maccabi games in 1977. And then came back home after that. The next year, Deborah and I got married and immediately moved to St. Louis. And then we're up there in St. Louis, and we were there 10 months. And then she told me she was pregnant and we were broke. I said, we're going home, keep doing this.
The way it usually works.
So we came back home, and I started coaching youth soccer, and I coached it. Yeah, isn't it crazy, isn't it? And I coached at a couple of private schools, the young teams or whatever. And then anyway, I got in 81, our oldest son was born 1980, and I was working for my dad's company, and I got a letter from TCU, an application to apply for the job, and I wasn't sure I wanted to do it. And anyway, and then I called the chairman of the board of trustees, a gentleman named Baird Friedman, who had been mayor here in Fort Worth, and I asked him if he'd write a letter of recommendation for me for the job. He says, no, I won't do that. The chancellor tomorrow, I'll mention it to him. So in fall 81, I got the head job part-time. It was just the men. It was $6,000. And that first year, I think we went 3-14-2 or 4-16, one of the, it wasn't real pretty, but I had no scholarships, and I got the job in July. And then, we went, one of our trips was to Evansville, Fred Schmaltz's place, with 1-0, but it could have been 20. And then we went over to Eastern Illinois and lost 2-0 to Shell team with the Final Four, and thinking, okay, we're doing all right. Then we go to Southern Illinois, Edwardsville, where Bob Gelker was coaching. And you talk about the Christians being fed to the Lions. It was 8-0. And they just started hitting long balls. They started chasing, and we very well that night, but we learned how to defend pretty well. But anyway, then every year they give $1 raise, and after 5 years, I'm like, how long can they do this? Well, I didn't know how much money TCU had, and then they added the women's program.
All right, so Dave, you were talking about you started the men's program at TCU in 1981, and then the women's program in 1986. back then you were with a few people who were doing that, meaning coaching both the men and the women. You mentioned Anson, but I believe Jim Rudy was doing it at UCF.
Yep.
Who else comes
Yeah,
to
Jim
mind?
was there. Yep.
Yeah, who else comes to mind between besides those two people who were running two programs at the Division I level?
Wow, that's a great question. I'm not sure. I'll have to think about that just right offhand. I'm sure somebody was, or a few were. I'm sure a lot, and every once in a while you still see. I don't recall. I do remember Jim doing. I don't remember. At this minute, I don't have an answer.
So Dave, one of the questions I want to try to comprehend is how did you schedule games with both the men and women? How did you schedule? What was the scheduling like?
Well, for 10 years, I was able to do all the scheduling for both teams. And then when we got in, because we were independent on the men, we had the old Southwest Conference Soccer League. But I mean, that was, so I could schedule anything and I was able to mix and match. But then we got into a conference and it changed. And I think we moved from the old Southwest Conference, which really didn't have soccer. Actually, it was a club sport. And in 1983 and 84, we won the Southwest Conference Championship because that SMU bowed out of it. They didn't play in it because they were trying for national recognition. And I think Shellis had come in 84, I believe. And I think, or 83, one or the other. Randy Waldrum, in fact, now that I think about it, I think was coaching with him. But anyway, we went those 2 years, but we played a full schedule. And I was able to do that. Then when TCU moved into the Western Athletic Conference, then it became very difficult and I couldn't do that. And I had a graduate assistant, which Butch Schwaffer was my first graduate assistant. He had played for me in 84 and then he was there when we started the women's team. But I was at most everything. And then it got more and more difficult, obviously, to do that.
Yeah. Share what the recruiting was like back then, because you're doing it again too at the same time, and a lot of programs are starting to add their programs to
Absolutely
compete against you.
Well, when Randy came to
share some
Baylor,
stories. Yeah, so share some stories on what that whole landscape looked like.
I coached a club team called Image 80. It was a really good team. We got to the regional finals and Cindy Parlow's team beat us. Oh gosh, whatever year that would have been in late, right when we started scholarship in the women. But I coached a good team, but I couldn't get hardly any of those kids because we had some that ended up going to Baylor and I think some went to A&M because we didn't have any money. And I said for years, I knew I was in the right place. Fort Worth and TCU are great places. I just needed some help. And it wasn't there to be had for the longest time. So we go with that group of kids. I just couldn't get any of them to stay. A couple went to Baylor to play when Randy went down there, Randy Waldrum. And they started the program with a full allotment of scholarships. And we had already had our program for 10 years. And but anyway, then that's why I was saying you felt like I lived in a sharecropper's cabin and they're building high rises around me and there was nothing I could do about it.
Did you feel more, it was like you had to contact so many kids, almost like a Division III just to get
exactly
because of what you're sharing with us of the competition, and you're losing kids right and left, and
sure, I had kids. They come visit. Boy, I love your place. How much is it going to cost? And I just told them check financial aid out, and we'll see what we can do. And some, like anything else, just like the Division III schools, you get a few, but you lose a whole lot.
Wow.
But that's the nature of it. And because you didn't have anything to offer other than a great school. And I used to tell them our field was really good, but spend $40,000 to come play here. So, but I mean, that's just the way it was.
Wow. And were you, what was the atmosphere with the athletic department as far as you trying to be competitive?
That didn't matter. What they didn't want you, and this is, I hate to say it, they wanted to make sure they didn't want you to embarrass the university. They knew that we're not giving you the best, we're not the worst, and but just do the best you can and don't embarrass the university. And I don't mean that with results. I didn't care who we played. We took I figured it was the kids' money we're spending. We took some great trips to play games because that's, to me, is important. Those are the memories.
Sure,
we were up at Seattle with Cliff McCrath. We played in their tournament. We used to go to Stanford when Colin Lindoris and Berhani were out there. They'd invite us. And I remember my athletic director, I took both teams to Stanford one year. And well, we had Southwest Airlines was the sponsor of the old Southwest Conference. So I traded, I don't even know how much my budget was. It wasn't much, but I traded the athletic director like $60 a ticket. So I got 40 kids traveling to Stanford to play. And I remember the AD that was talking to the chancellor one day, says, what's he doing in California? He says, don't ask. He's a magician. So, but it's good. You have friends in places, and like our guys, that became a struggle after all the scholarships with the women, and the men had none. I had 2.5 scholarships for 2 years with the men.
Wow.
And I was still recruiting with that. And then I found out 10 months later that they decided they weren't going to continue that, and they forgot to tell me. So it was a priority.
What I was going to ask you, they shut it down in 2002. And you in 2005, quote unquote, resigned.
It was announced on January 1st of 2005, and it was about this big in the bottom of the last page of the newspaper. And nobody reads the newspaper on January 1st, especially on a Sunday morning. So that's when it was announced. And I was playing golf with a friend. He says, "How's everything at TCU?" I said, "You obviously don't read the paper." Oh, anyway, in fact, this is a true story. I went to a basketball game on January 2nd. I did, because I still get to go to the games because I'm a retiree. And I ran into the chancellor. He may have retired by then because he's the one that hired me. Well, the athletic director did. And the chancellor says, it's Bill Tucker, who just passed away a few months ago, just a great guy. He said, "I was going to call you." He says, "What the heck is going on around here?" Now, we had no scholarships for they dropped them in and all that. He said, "Did you have sex with one of your players?" He was like, totally. I said, "No, sir, I did not." But and in fact, he helped me write a letter to try to get our kids' education continue to get paid for. But anyway,
boy, this did not think it would.
Things are different in Texas, buddy.
I mean, that's
things are different in Texas.
Well, all I know is, looking back over your 24 years, you really don't have any consistent pattern of success, so we're going another direction.
Yeah.
And having said that, I've got kids that are doctors, lawyers, just very successful people, nurses, and don't tell me that we weren't successul. Just got to look at it a little differently.
Unfortunately, Bone, this sounds an awful lot like the Vanderbilt men's.
Yeah, I'm program.
Sorry. This sounds an awful lot sounds like a parallel path to what they did with Vanderbilt men's soccer too.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Randy was up there, right?
Yes.
Randy Johnson was coaching,
yes.
And oh my gosh,
had 2.5 scholarships, and they just decided, you know what, we're going to add bowl. We're going to drop you guys and add bowling, because soccer obviously costs a school like Vanderbilt too much, and they didn't want to pursue it. And it's like,
right.
You
Well,
remember our buddy in kind of the era before this, Tim Carter had built a great program
at Illinois State.
Yes.
Illinois State, and they had just beaten SMU or something
Yeah.
the first time, and he went in for his in review, and his AD's like, "Hey, by the way,
Exactly. We went up.
we're going to put all this money into one AA football."
Exactly. Yeah, we went up and played Tim's team. In fact, that was a year that may have, God, I wish I could remember what year it was, but we had a chance to make the playoffs, even though we didn't have scholarships. We went up there and they thumped us pretty good. He had a really good team up there.
And he built it from nothing. Built a stadium.
Yeah.
Beautiful,
Yeah. He's another one of the guys that did a great job and paid beyond the dues.
Sorry, Mo, we got sidetracked.
No,
Sorry.
we always do.
Yeah.
That's what the show's about. So, Dave, you mentioned a little bit about the Maccabi games. First, explain to people what it is, where it is, how often it takes place. You've gone through the whole thing. You know, you were the United States national team captain. You were an assistant coach. You were the head coach. So just share with everybody, again, what it is, when it takes place, how you get selected.
Yeah. In 1977, it would have been somewhere early on, I got a call from a guy named Don Winchick, who was up in Connecticut with Joe Macknick at, University of New Haven. And he was going to be the coach. And he called me. I don't know. He got my number from Tino Likowski, who was the assistant with the Dallas Tornado, with Al Miller, I believe, at the time. And he calls me and asked me if I'd be interested. I said, well, I might be. And then I never heard from him for a while. And I called him back, and somehow or other, there was a miscommunication that I was a professional player. Well, I wasn't a professional player. I just finished college. I wasn't good enough to be a professional player. But nevertheless, so anyway, I went to a tryout in Los Angeles, and we played the LA Maccabis in a scrimmage, and he invited me to go with the team. Lenny Reutemann was on that team. Wow. We all know Lenny. And golly, I can't remember. Shep's little brother, Roy Messing, was on the team. Yeah. I can't remember Rick's last name, another Connecticut guy, goalkeeper. But anyway, we got to New Haven in the summer. We had about a 2.5 week training camp up there at the University of New Haven. Joe training the keepers, and John Kowalski was was training the field players. And we played some great games. The Centennials up in New Haven, the Connecticut Bicentennials, I think they were called. They played in the old Yale Bowl, and we played them and went and played the Cosmos reserves and the Meadowlands. And so it was a great training camp. And that's where my relationship with Joe and John started. So anyway, then we go to Israel. And if I remember right, we tied Peru and Chile, and we beat Argentina. And then we lost lost to South Africa in knockout competition. They thumped us pretty good, but it was a great experience, and they named me captain. And obviously that's something that I take with a lot of pride. Yeah. So it's the Jewish Olympics. It's every 4 years, a year after the Olympics. Mm-hmm. And they go to Israel in those 4 years. So it's pretty fascinating, though. What an unbelievable country, and just an amazing experience.
Were you we had Dan Gaspar on this show, and Evie, I don't know if you remember, one of the questions I was really excited to ask him about being an American in Iran, and then if you lost, what was that like? Yeah. What was it, what was it being an American back then, especially, still now, right? So the violence, the security, what were your feelings, being in that country, and what were your feelings as far as machine guns around you, 24/7, things like that? And any stories about that?
Yeah, a little bit. We stayed in the Hotel Ramat Aviv, I believe is what it was called, and it had guards around the hotel. That's where our group stayed. But you get used to it. I mean, if you're driving down the road in a bus and guys with their M16s over their shoulders and they're thumbing a ride, just going somewhere. And we always had security, and we had guys, in fact, out in in kind of the play area near the pool, soldiers with their with their machine guns on their back playing soccer with us. So, but it's one of those places that wherever you go, it's there, and I think what you do is do your best to just be aware of the surroundings, and but all in all, it felt pretty safe. Felt pretty safe.
And what did you think of the competition? As far as, first, what were your expectations, and then when you actually got to see it, was it?
I mean, we were competitive, but we weren't competitive with South Africa. They were much better than us. But I thought that, again, with tying Peru and tying Chile, I didn't know what to expect, to be honest. Wasn't sure at all. And then we were fortunate enough to beat Argentina. But South Africa they were better than we were. And we probably helped make them better. I don't remember a whole lot about that other than the score. But, at that time, now, when I went back in 2001 as a coach, the Israelis had their under-19 boys national team playing for the home country. And Lev Kirshner was coaching, I believe it was 2001. And he had some really good kids. Jonathan Bornstein was in that team. Benny Feilhaber, I believe, was in that team. Wow. And they had some good players. But those kids over there were so seasoned in the way they play. And we had a bunch of college guys for the most part. In fact, I don't remember if it's 2001 or 2005 that as soon as the games were over, Benny headed to, I believe, Germany to play. He was under contract. And Jonathan had a great career between MLS and the Mexican League, I believe. But I just thought that the Israelis were a really seasoned team, and you could tell that they were European soccer was really, really good for them. Great learning tool.
Yeah, good segue. As Evie alluded to at the start of the show, you've been with the United States soccer staff. You were with them from 2005 to 2010. What were some of your memories first, of those special years, and explain to us how you got selected?
Once again, life's a funny thing. So when I left, the TCU thing ended, and I called April, who I'd known for years. I'd gone out and watched them train at Carolina, and just got to know her pretty well. And I called her and left her a message after I had the parting of the ways with TCU, or should I say after I retired from TCU. And just left her a message saying, hey, just so you know, I'm not at TCU anymore. I wasn't looking for anything. I didn't know what I was going to do. I had a little time that so I didn't have to rush into anything. She called me back and asked me if I'd be interested in the national staff coaching job. And I said, I might be. What is it? And I didn't know. And anyway, they flew me out to California, and I met Jeff Pill out there. They had a camp going on, and April was out there. And so I had a good time visiting with them and seeing what they were doing. And I accepted the job, and I started, I think it was early February of 2005. Mike Dickey and I started the same day. And that was the day April resigned. And I kind of thought, what did I do? But anyway, it was a great job for 5 years. It was a great job. I had first off, like after I took the job, I get this big box of stuff with US Soccer logos on it with a lot of nice gear. And I remember thinking to myself, this may not be all bad. And anyway, so, but it was such an honor to wear the crest was just amazing.
Wow.
But for 5 years, I was a national staff coach on the girls' side and in Region 3. So I traveled throughout the Southeast, Florida, Georgia, North South Carolina, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and North and South Texas. And truly, it was a great job because the main emphasis, it seemed like, between coaching education and player identification. And so we took 100 kids from around the country every summer that we'd identified into one location and for U14 national camp.
Yeah.
And found just some wonderful players. I met Lindsay Horan in California at what then was Home Depot Center when she was 13. And, if I wouldn't have found her, obviously the next person would have. But I was fortunate enough there were some terrific players. Morgan Bryan trained her the first time when she was 11, I think. But just some really, really good players. And that was a neat part of the job. Got to go over to Germany and do ODP Europe. And for a weekend with Platini Sohoff. That was, another neat experience, but it was really, really neat for 5 years. The coaching schools were just really special. I always hated leaving to go to coaching school because it was 10 days, but when I got there, it was so easy to immerse yourself in it. And you just hope you help somebody a little bit along the way.
What national team games do you remember over those 5 years?
What national team game? Well, now again, I wasn't with the full team at all. One of the neatest games I remember, we had a coaching school going on, was when David Beckham played his first game for LA Galaxy. We were all out there and they played Chelsea and got to watch that. That was kind of fun. That was neat. We were in Chicago when I think, wow, we may play at Soldier Field. We had the U.S. men had a match. We were up there for meetings, and I can't. Those were World Cup qualifiers, and right now it may have been Costa Rica, but I don't recall who we played. But it was a big game. That was a big one.
Do you feel, based on what you know today, that the United States women's scouting is going in a direction that it should be as far as identifying players for the national
team? That is kind of hard for me to say. Because when I would go out, somebody say, you need to see this kid, and I'd go see this kid, and I'd say, oh, well, that's I specifically a little girl down in Georgia named Allison Wetherington. And somebody told me I need to go see this kid. And so I go to they had their interstate games or something. They had 5 state games that they had. And she was 12, probably, maybe 13. And I remember seeing her, and she was special, totally unique, like Lindsay Horan. But I remember thinking to myself, oh, that's Molly Packman, only a little bit better. Molly Packman played at Duke, who was a kid that came out of North Carolina that we knew. So, I was able to get around and see kids from all over the place. And so I had a pretty good education of the players and the top ones. And so it's a big country, and I'm sure we're missing some. But at the same time, I can't tell you if we're doing it right, if we're doing it wrong. They bring them into training centers still, I guess. I think, is that right? Yeah. But all you're going to bring in is the ones that you see. And I don't know how much they're getting out and about.
Got to go find them. Got to go find them. Yep.
Yeah, you got to go find them. Yeah.
But what are your thoughts on, the U.S. women have, I think, obviously been a pretty dominant power. Do you feel the rest of the world is, finally catching on?
Absolutely. Yeah, no question about it. And I think that's inevitable as well. I don't think that we invented it, basically. I mean, let's be fair. No disrespect to Anson. I don't mean that. He's done an amazing job. But we kind of invented women's soccer, and it only makes sense that the rest of the world's getting better because they're immersed in it every day.
That's exactly right.
Something that we're not. Yeah. So when I watch a game, I watched an Italian league women's game the other day, and Roma looked really, really good. I didn't watch the whole thing, but you watch the English league games with Arsenal and Chelsea with Sam Kerr, I believe is her name, the Australian girl. That there's rhythm to those games. To me, there's more rhythm to it. They're more fluid. I feel like they may be more tactical, but you got a lot of good players on the field, and I know we do too. That our kids coming up through the ranks that we're doing with club soccer, I'm not sure they're getting that same emphasis on what
You're
really
absolutely
matters.
right, Coach. And I'm glad you said that, because if you take just England, okay, so the English women were not even in the conversation 2 cycles ago,
Right.
World Cup cycles ago. So now in the last 9 months, they beat Germany in the European Cup final. They beat the United States of America, and they beat Brazil.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's 20 years, 15 years ish, 16 years, and now they're right there at the elite level, and they're expecting to win the World Cup.
Right.
Yep. Go ahead.
Right.
Sorry, Greg.
No, I was about to. You took my steam away there. All good.
I think I read something.
I was going to ask you, Dave. Do you feel the USA will win the World Cup?
Oh, that playing Australia and New Zealand. I don't know. You think they should be one of the top 3. What's been interesting in a way is that the Japanese and the Chinese have kind of taken south turn. They don't seem to be as dominant as they were, even as technical as certainly the Japanese. I don't know. I haven't seen the French team. So they changed coaches now, right?
Yes.
They had a big upheaval. The English girls are really, really good. The French, have been good. And the Dutch, that's another group. It's just, we'll see. I guess that's why they'll play the games.
Yeah.
But I definitely think we've been caught. I don't think there's any question about it.
No question.
Yeah.
What do you think we should be doing better that we're not?
It's interesting when I think we need to be more concerned about keeping the ball and doing things, creating numbers up on the field. Our kids, too often I go places and it's a relay race. It's just 100 miles an hour. And what are the tactics to that?
Yep.
There really aren't any. And the bigger, stronger, faster kids wins.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean they know how to play soccer. And now, so what's going to happen when they match up against a defender that's as big and strong as fast as they are? And now they have 2 of them back there. It's part of the learning curve, but I've got kids. I see that down here is that it's just 100 miles an hour. And I'm thinking, what are the tactics here? I don't care how high pressure you put on the ball. You better figure out how to keep it, because and I know the team that keeps the ball longest usually wins. Doesn't always happen.
Yeah. Good segue. You're currently the girls coach at Arlington Heights High School.
Right.
Why did you want to, you went club, you went university, now high school. What made you want to return to that level?
Another funny story and how life works. When I knew I was leaving US Soccer, we had a parting of the ways. When it all became about the boys academy, the boys developmental academy in 2010, we went into a meeting April 10th of 2010 into Chicago as the national staff coach on the girls side. And I came out of that meeting as the technical advisor in Texas and Oklahoma on the boys side. Well, that wasn't what I signed on for. And, I'd go to watch games and anyway, that was an odd deal. And you didn't ask me about that, but I thought that was a real strange thing, because I felt like US Soccer was robbing their own clientele, because they went and took all these clubs and put them in the developmental academy. And US Soccer or US Youth Soccer had worked so hard to make that thing work. But anyway, that's just my opinion. So that was a weird thing. So anyway, we had a parting of the ways. So I called a friend of mine when I knew I was leaving and said, hey, let's have lunch. He'd worked with me at TCU as a grad assistant, and he owned an oil and gas company. And I'm thinking, why is he doing this? But so I I call him and said, let's have lunch. So we go meet at a place, and he said, what's up? I said, I need a job. He says, when do you want to start? So that was my interview into the oil and gas business. So I did that for 2 years with him as a landman. And then I left there after 2 years and went to, because I was sitting at a desk making phone calls, and that just wasn't my best place to be. So I met a guy, and I changed companies, and got a raise, and I was out on the road. So that was fun. And then he walked in and shut this project down in April of 2013, I think. And in the meantime, 3 weeks before that, I get a phone call from a friend who I'd worked with his daughter some, asking me if I knew anybody that could come to Arlington Heights and coach, because they had a pretty good group. And I said, I don't know, I'll ask around. And then 3 weeks later, I get let go by this oil and gas company. And I called him back 3 weeks later, and I asked him if he found anybody. And he said, no. I said, I might be interested. So what I learned about myself is I need a little bit of stability. And the oil business doesn't give you much of that. So anyway, I went and I met with the principal. I went and did the emergency certification, the summer program, and I got thrown in the lap of the new principal. And it's been a phenomenal 10 years. That first year, we got to the regional finals. We won about 5 games, I guess, in the playoffs, and we're in the regional finals. And 10 minutes into the game, one of my forwards gets red carded, and I remember thinking to myself, I wasn't planning on that. And so anyway, we lost that game 2-0. We haven't been able to return to that as well, but I've really enjoyed it. I feel like the kids have responded for the most part, and it's been a great it's been really, really rewarding. I think you might be able to make more difference there than you can at the college level, as far as helping kids grow up. I've got kids that keep coming back, and so it's been a really neat thing. My principal has been amazing. I got thrown in her lap. Her daughter was my goalkeeper for 4 years. But anyway, so that's kind of how that happened. And now I help coach tennis the last 4 years too, and that's been a lot of fun too. So anyway, that's how all that happened.
Share with us how you deal with maybe the overreactionary parents.
That's a great question. I have been, in 10 years, to my face, I have never been questioned. And I know I went to a thing last November for Texas High School Coaches Association. I was speaking at a deal on tryouts, and I had talked about things that I do, but what they wanted to know was basically, how do you document everything so you can justify it to the parents why their kid didn't make it or this one did. And that was an interesting revelation for me, because I don't think that way. I trust my judgment when it comes to that. I've got enough experience, and I think the parents recognize that, but I've seldom had any complaints to my face. They may, when they get home, they may say bad things. I don't know, but I don't document things. I just coach.
How, do you think in this day and age of everyone playing select, especially in your area, that they either know they're going to make the team or there's an unknown?
Well, we have 3 teams, 2 JV teams, and like I had a couple of girls that this year I could have brought up to varsity, but they would have been sitting the bench, and I don't want them sitting a bench. I'd rather that they play. And so I've got some kids that played club soccer that didn't get much game time. I had some freshmen this year that were just outstanding, and they kind of carried us. Our district isn't real strong, but we didn't give up 1 goal in 14 games. So there's something to be said for our ability to keep the ball. And again, some of the teams weren't real good, but still, it was a really nice mixture. And I remember when we started, even though we'd get beat up pretty good in the preseason, I remember thinking, these kids don't realize it, but this is probably the best group that we've had, because I had a player in every position that could play. My biggest concerns about when you talk about the select kids or the club kids is those kids getting burned out. they're getting pulled in so many different directions. So a lot of times in training, like we train early in the morning, and then the night before they may have had a big tough practice with their club. And then the last thing I wanted a kid to do was get up thinking, I don't want to go do soccer today. Yep. So I never worked nearly as hard as I could and maybe should, but I don't want them to lose the love of the sport.
Wow. Well said. Good segue into you mentioned your son, Adam. So guys, I don't know if you really heard what he was saying. He was the number one player in college golf when he walked on at TCU. He turned down scholarships from Stanford in Oklahoma.
Yeah, I don't know that he was number one in college golf. He did come in second in NCAA's his junior year. He went to every tournament. He never missed a tournament in the 5 years. He redshirted 1 year. But, yeah, that was another interesting experience. But he was a walk-on All-American. That's true, because we were told this again. I don't know how you all, if you've coached in college, I know, Eric, you did, but administration is really important. And if they've got your back, it's really helpful. So our kids were all able to, we have 3 kids, we're all able to get free tuition at TCU. And I was told by our senior women's administrator that if he got $1 from the golf program, the entire tuition would count against the golf program. So for 3 years, we paid all his room, board, books, and fees, because that's what we were told. And then I had a player whose dad taught at the university, and I told him that exact same thing 3 years later. He said, that's not right. He said, I called the NCAA, and they said that money wouldn't count against the program. So for 3 years, we're fighting our own administration, putting out dollars, but it was a great experience for him, and he went to the right place. And it's been amazing. I tell all the girls that ever play for me, learn to play golf. You can always get a date. And I firmly believe that. But anyway, that was truly amazing. We played on the Walker Cup team for the United States, and and the Palmer Cup team, and played, in fact, with Brant Snedeker when he was at Vanderbilt, Eric, and a number of other guys. But it's been really rewarding. He played soccer from the day he could walk, and thank God he found golf.
Yeah. So, Dave, just so you know, Evie's had to slip away right now. So he's had some family things.
That's all right. No problem.
FYI. But hey, John Boa, I think you're going to like this next question. So, we always ask what people prefer to spend their time with, when they have some time. What do they like to do? And it's usually the answers like Dave gave, with family, playing golf, right? Okay.
Some
big answers, right? But John, this is an interesting one. Western swing dancing, okay? And I don't know what this is, by the way. Riding, cutting horses.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to get this explained on this show tonight. How about that?
Okay. I love it. So my wife and I love to dance, and we've been dancing for years, and Western swing music is just, I just love it. It's dance music. And I met a guy maybe 5 years ago now who we were sitting at a club, a bar, a restaurant, whatever, to go listen to this guy play music. And we just start talking, which I have a habit of doing that. And one thing led to another. And who do you know? And who do you know? Well, he was starting a Western Swing Festival and doing a documentary on Bob Wills. And so now you guys need to go back and Google Bob Wills, because we were in Oklahoma City on Saturday night for an awards dinner. Some dear friends got a guy named Red Stegall, who has the Red Stegall Cowboy Gathering here in Fort Worth in the 33rd year this year, I think. It's just amazing. But he does a show called Somewhere West of Wall Street on the Cowboy Channel or RFD TV, and it's just great. And he's been a friend for years, and he got a Lifetime Achievement Award. And then another friend, Michael Martin Murphy, I don't know if you know that name or not, but he's another musician, And he and his son wrote a song that was awarded a Wrangler Award is what they called it. And he's a dear friend. And then Bob Wills, who was the inventor of Western Swing or the king of Western Swing, we were there with his daughter. Bob Wills passed away in 1975. We were at the dinner with his daughter and there to be part of that. And so that was really, really cool. Great event. But anyway, I'm on the board of advisors for this Cowtown, birthplace of Western Swing. And the music is just phenomenal. A lot of fiddles. They say in Texas, it's not a band unless you've got a steel guitar and a fiddle. So anyway, but that we've danced for years, but it's really getting to be, if you go Google a group called Asleep at the Wheel, they've been together 50 years. Yeah. So Ray Benson's another friend of mine, not a great friend, but another friend of mine. And I've known him a long time. But anyway, that kind of music, because it was all Bob Wills music and the Texas Playboys. And another friend, Jason Roberts, is now, because all the old Texas Playboys have passed on, and he's now taken it over, and he's another friend. So anyway, somehow or other kind of got into that. And then the cutting horses, I have been interested in cutting probably since about 1975. And it's just what it is, and I'll do my best to explain it. You've got a herd of cattle. Horse and rider go into the herd. It's a 2.5-minute run, and I'm going to give you a guy's name that you can YouTube. A guy named Matt Gaines, and he had a little horse called Special New Baby in you, and he had a 234. And you talk about perfection. This is great. But anyway, go into the herd. You cut a cow away from the herd. Cow wants to get back to the herd, and the horse and rider's job is to keep the cow away from the herd. So it's ranch work. They're cow horses, and they're bred for that. But you put one hand on the reins, you put them down, you put the other one on the horn, and you guide with your feet when you want to cue your horse. But as I say, and Fort Worth is the home of the National Cutting Horse Association, but it is dancing, which is exactly what we do. Time and space are your friend. And when these cows start pushing on the horse and rider, the horse can't handle it. They lose the cow. Cow goes back to the herd. They lose points. So you gain points, you lose points, just like in golf where you've got 5 judges, you throw out a high score and a low score. You start at 70 per judge, so you go in at 210, even par. And then you gain points if you can control your cow in the middle of the arena. And then you have 2.5